You're listening to 102.6, and this is Kat.
How transformative could AI be? And I think it has the prospect to be more
And we'll see our temperature slowly warming up as we go into late morning.
Yesterday was another record breaker for a whole lot of the Bay Area.
On the inside, right?
Yeah.
In 2015, what I was observing was a major shift. Cloud had been around, AWS had been around, the major cloud providers were already, in the business. But you were finally starting to see a transition from the large enterprises, mid-enterprises, really starting to take an active interest and deploying a lot of workloads in the public cloud environments. And at the same time, there was another technology transformation that was happening related to containers.
There were some people that were excited, and there were some people who were scared. You had to throw away a lot of your knowledge and replace it. You had to learn, you had to catch up.
That's when that space really started to get interesting. Google was using them in Borg, and so we saw that kind of coming online, and they'd reached this maturity level where it wasn't a bespoke tool for specific big businesses, but it was suddenly like everybody could start doing these.
Kubernetes was becoming one of the most talked about container management deployment solutions, but it wasn't clear that it was going to win the container space. But people were definitely falling in love with containers and the sort of experience of using containers.
As I observed, the rise in containers and Kubernetes and the shift to, using public cloud environments for your SaaS platform, it became clear to me that we would need a new way of developing software, of designing software, but also deploying at scale.
Pratik, Saradi, and I were working on our second startup together. We were frustrated by the amount of time, effort, and kind of responsiveness of building development tools and infrastructure. Every company we started at, we had to build up all of this infrastructure from scratch ourselves. And the resulting infrastructure wasn't even that good. And so we asked ourselves, maybe the time is right to create a product that can make all of these problems go away.
Start, a company and focus on making the lives of developers and also companies that were starting to think about this easier.
We left to start Applatix. We basically create a platform to help enterprises leverage cloud as well as containers and DevOps to create faster, more responsive, pleasant to use development infrastructure.
I have worked with a very, very talented pool of engineers over the course of my career. You develop a sense of hiring great talent.
I had a coffee conversation with him. Hey, I'm looking for a job. I'm looking for microservice. I'm looking for public cloud. I'm looking for container technology. If I have an opportunity for all three checkboxed, that's my dream job. Pratik paused and said, that's what we are doing here at the Applatix. I said, okay, great.
I was living in Sunnyvale, driving every day to San Mateo. It was painful. And then Applatix was 15 minutes away from me. I could just walk, maybe it's meant to be, and I just applied for a job. So found my friends accidentally. I guess the best decision I've made in my career.
Applatix actually was pretty ambitious in what we were trying to accomplish.
They want to build a full CI/CD system, DevOps platform on top of the public cloud, on top of the container, and make the microservice adoption and the transition to be much easier.
Provisioning, developing, deploying, monitoring.
Basically a one-stop shop for all your service needs. And so that was kind of the big vision.
Their tagline was to make Kubernetes boring for enterprises.
I'm pretty sure everyone who interviewed with Applatix was kind of obsessed with building a DevOps tool, so everyone had opinion about how it should look like. It was just fun to work because we were building what we felt is needed by everyone. So it was very high energy because we had to create, features that normally would take in a big company like months, and at Applatix it would be like, let's do it by next Wednesday, and then we do it.
After about a year or so, we had an initial version of the product. But it turned out that it was hard to get enterprises to try it.
Thank you for joining us on this webcast. So what does the Applatix solution look like?
To buy our product, they need not only adopt the Kubernetes, but adopting the public cloud, adopting the container. Nowadays, those are 3 companies to sell the product. But at that time, we are 1 company trying to sell the solution. We need to convincing all 3 points at the same time. It's so hard. There was a lot of apprehension. There was a lot of distrust, about where this technology was going, whether it would actually materialize into something, large as it is today.
So we started discussing about, well, how do we make it easier for companies to try it and get experience with this technology? We decided maybe we should take one of the key components of our product and provide it as an open source software, open source project. So that's where we hit on the idea of basically taking our workflow engine. At that time, it was very tightly tied with our platform, but we basically wanted to take it out and make it a standalone component that any developer could very easily try and use. So I talked with Alexander, is this something we can do? He said, okay, let me think about it. And then 2 days later, he had a working prototype.
It's the component that we built that helped developers to orchestrate batch processing. And so that developers really liked it, and that's why we decided to keep this part and improve it a bit and then open source it. And that's how Argo was created.
We were very confident about the project, but the logo discussion was long. We had strict guidance from our CEO, Pratik, that, hey, it has to be funny, it has to start with A or B so that it's always top of the list alphabetically, and it cannot have more than 2 syllables.
Most Kubernetes projects or surrounding projects had a nautical theme to it. And so we said that's the second step. We need to at least figure out what the nautical theme was. When I looked at what we were trying to do, we were essentially trying to lead developers onto a new paradigm. In Greek mythology, there's a character, Jason and the Argonauts. They went in search of the golden fleece, but one of the ships they rode on was called Argo.
And that's how Argo became the name.
I had a really good designer working with me at the time, and we were bouncing ideas, and he came up with the idea that Argo also refers to a species of octopi or octopuses. And that's how the Argo mascot was born. That journey started, very, very slowly at first.
In the early days, frankly, it was mostly Applatix employees sitting in the Slack channel talking to ourselves.
When we first started holding Argo community meetings,
a queue in the controller, I think, would be very valuable.
It would also just be the maintainers that worked on the project, and we would agree to kind of use different laptops just to kind of make it seem like there was more people attending the meetings than there actually was.
When I first saw it, I thought, yeah, I guess that's kind of interesting, but this hasn't solved any unique problems yet, and there are a lot of people that are solving this problem. So it was like a cool tech demo, but I didn't think it was going to be world-changing at the time.
The first version is actually still quite a heavy product because it has all special logic about our original vision, our original idea. But then we realized the Kubernetes in that year released something called the CRD, Customer Resource Definition. Basically, it's open up the database to everyone in the Kubernetes ecosystem. Means that you are able to really build a Kubernetes native solution now. We realized that if we want to have a very generic engine and not depending on other database or make things complicated, we have to leverage that feature.
I put together a prototype of it working as a CRD about a week before KubeCon. Last minute, Ed Lee decided, okay, let's demo this instead of our original product.
I remember talking about it to various peoples and the media, not really getting much attention. But then on the plane ride home at the airport, suddenly had like 2 or 3 people come up and start chatting about Argo and asking me about how to do things. And I could see the engineers engaging. And this continued on the flight. And it continued after the flight, right? And that's kind of when it hit me that, okay, we are on the right path.
First few companies who picked Argo Workflows were NVIDIA right out of 2017 KubeCon, Google because they were building the open source project Kubeflow for MLOps, and BlackRock because they were building their Aladdin platform which needed a workflow engine.
About a year or so after launching Argo Workflows, Intuit approached us. In particular, Mariana Tessel.
I decided to join Intuit,
who had been VP of Engineering at Docker. She really wanted to inject cloud-native technologies into Intuit.
They were really looking to build a whole new team to help shepherd Intuit's journey into the public cloud, and it led to an acquisition. And I think that's when the Argo journey really, really took off. At the same time, the whole GitOps paradigm was also being spun up very quickly.
The kind of start of it was like, hey, now that I'm working off of a declarative format for my applications, I can put all of that declarative format in Git.
You can sync up your Kubernetes cluster with a Git repository, and then every change that someone makes to that Git repository will be synced to the cluster.
And if I want to do disaster recovery, I already know what my desired state of my application is. I can just rebring it back. And before this, that was not an easy process.
Traditionally, source code systems are more of an offline system. With GitOps, Git or GitHub essentially was becoming more of an online system. As we looked at this, we figured, okay, we need a mechanism by which we can reliably deploy software at scale.
After joining Intuit, one of the very first things we did was to start the Argo CD project. Once you really start deploying lots of containerized workloads into the cloud, you really want a more kind of agile tool or platform for doing this.
We were a fintech company. We had a lot of compliance requirements. So we needed a CD solution that will work for enterprises, that will have single sign-on integrated, that will be able to deploy to multiple clusters at scale, that can deploy thousands of applications.
We didn't intend to build Argo CD from the get-go. We actually looked at what solutions were available at the time.
We couldn't find any open source solutions.
Ultimately, we decided we needed to build something for us.
This is Argo CD's user interface. Here we are seeing the various applications that this Argo CD is currently managing.
On paper, Argo CD helps to automate the pattern that we refer as GitOps. But in practice, it also provides a great set of features that help developers troubleshoot and understand Kubernetes.
So we delivered and developed the Argo CD. Main reason is there is a strong need to solving, and there is a gap to fill at that time in the open source community.
Hi everyone, so welcome to Argo community meeting. Today's agenda is to first demo Argo CD.
We open sourced Argo CD, and obviously we used it extensively at Intuit already.
Having deployed it at scale within Intuit gave the confidence to people that were starting to adopt it to say, hey, it has passed the enterprise barrier.
The take-up of Argo CD was a lot faster than with Argo Workflows.
In 2018 KubeCon, we talked about Argo CD. Immediately, it became popular.
After every event, you would see a little bit of surge in GitHub stars and interest and maybe people joining the Slack.
It was pretty clear from the beginning that Argo CD was a very good choice for us because it was so developer-centric, right? It had that fancy UI and provided you great observability into what's actually happening. If you had a typo in your YAML file, it would show you right away. It was a very, very awesome thing to see.
Suddenly you had a tool that looked very much like the tool that I always wish I had. I can put a source of truth in Git, and I can say, this is what I want my software to look like. Argo CD is gonna sync it up to Kubernetes, and Kubernetes controllers and etcd, they're gonna keep track of that and make sure that that becomes reality. Wow.
The early adopters in the community for Argo CD became companies like Tesla, Major League Baseball, Google, NVIDIA.
No one's just going to contribute to an open source project, right? So first you have to solve a real pain point for them.
Today's agenda is to go over our new project, which is Argo Events.
BlackRock was building their trading platform Aladdin at the time. They were heavy users of Argo Workflows and Argo CD. They saw a need to have events trigger certain workflows or certain things.
We were thinking of building one ourselves, but then we learned that BlackRock already had a eventing system that worked with Argo Workflows that they had built for their own internal application needs.
So we asked them if they would like to contribute, and they did. So we now have an Argo Events repo with code.
The quality was great. It was actually a useful product, not so specific for BlackRock. And that's how Argo Events joined the Argo family.
We're very excited to become a corporate contributor to Argo. We've already seen like the stars and the forks on the repo, in the past couple, hours. So it's very exciting from our side.
When you start thinking about the software deployment process, you essentially do either a blue-green deployment or you do a slow roll, canary deployment, for example. So rollouts was a natural progression of that. It's like, hey, yes, you have Argo CD, which allows you to just deploy software, but you typically do not want to just deploy it, at scale. So you need some kind of controlling mechanism.
We want to deploy the first progress delivery solution to be able to do the blue-green and canary, be able to integrate with all your observability tools to give you the feedback loop, and be able to automatically roll back when something bad happened to reduce the MTTD and MTDR. And those concepts doesn't really exist in the Kubernetes space.
First attempt was to script it, basically use some bash coding, use some Jenkins magic, and we never could make it stable. And then at some point we realized we cannot deliver good user experience by a solution, so we decided to build a product. I'm going to show Rollouts controller in action.
There was a talk in which we showed how you can do canary releases, and we demoed it with a very cool app.
We suddenly start getting all the green traffic, which is great. That means we slowly migrated to the next version of our application.
Literally, there was like standing ovation.
Thank you.
Nobody had seen live on stage such a cool way of doing progressive delivery using containers and service mesh.
Going into 2020, there was a big question of if the Kubernetes market was going to continue to grow, because there was a little bit of slowdown happening in the world. Everybody knows about it.
A rapidly spreading virus.
New virus.
Around the world.
But it turns out that during that time period, the need to solve software problems in a programmatic way got even more intense. So the market actually suddenly jumped forward.
People were finally kind of really grokking deploying applications Kubernetes. And what ends up happening is you're like, okay, we're there, but now we need to operate at a much larger scale. We need a little bit more maturity about our deployment process. We need a workflow engine. We need to be able to do canary deployments, etc. And Argo essentially is the perfect solution.
Everyone is talking about Argo. Everyone is kind of thinking about Argo can work with any other open source project. With Argo deploy stuff, Argo can install Istio, Argo can install Certificate Manager, Argo can install Cluster Autoscaler. Everyone's thinking, hey, this is the right way to deploy things.
One of the things we did, we just created a file called users.md, and we ask everyone as a favor, like if you want to help the project, please just add your name. If you use it in production, we'll be happy to have your name in this file. First, we were excited about each and every name on that list. And then it became clear that, yeah, wow, it's like getting out of control. We had pull requests opened by those companies, and we didn't have time to merge them just because of how many names had to be added. We realized we just cannot do it ourselves anymore. There's just too much work to do.
And so early on, we made it a very, very conscious choice as we were starting to engage with the community to say, we want to learn from you, we want to hear from you, but we want to see your contributions.
I connected to the project Slack and chatted with people and started implementing smaller features. Then I contributed a couple of big features like TLS certificate pinning, like the PGP signature verification and stuff like that. The project was just coming alive. Like, it has a very cozy community of a couple of people. They had a dedicated Slack instance, maybe 1,000 people on it. Everyone was so excited about Argo CD.
As the 4 Argo projects grew in popularity, our number of contributors, number of maintainers, as well as number of end users grew. And in 2020, Argo was contributed to CNCF as an incubating project.
We skipped Sandbox and went straight to incubation because of adoption that had already happened at the time, the interest from other vendors and other parties in the project.
One of the big advantages of joining the CNCF was that they had a model for governing open source projects.
Once an open source project lives in a foundation, instead of having one parent, it now has many parents, right? All the members in the foundation technically help cultivate and own this project, right? So you're not just dependent on one company.
It's kind of like a force to make the project to be more stable. So you have this maintainer structure, you have the governance doc.
Even if Intuit decides not to invest anything anymore, it's okay, like project will survive.
When we were accepted, there was a elevated sense of legitimacy and acceptance from businesses and organizations as something they can invest in.
After that, the growth of Argo even skyrocketed.
What ends up happening is, a project generally gets some more attention, you get a little bit more users, a little more startups, larger companies involved playing with it. Argo did a really good job of kind of building out its ecosystem in CNCF by allowing other companies and individuals to join as maintainers.
Shortly after that, RedHat approached us about joining the project.
Someone from Intuit told me that RedHat wants to build a product of Argo CD. And if I'd be interested in working full-time on Argo CD, so they connected me with RedHat. To be honest, RedHat is one of my all-time favorite companies, like open source legend, right? So that was a match made in heaven. So yeah, I joined RedHat to build a product of Argo CD.
By that time, a lot of Red Hat's customers, particularly their OpenShift customers, were already using Argo CD. So they wanted to be able to properly support their customers. So that was their motivation for wanting to join the project.
Red Hat with OpenShift had a mission to make the platform really developer-centric. I think that's where Argo CD came into play because it is so developer-centric.
And OpenShift has become the most popular, successful Kubernetes platform in the world. I mean, they're knocking it out of the park with OpenShift.
After Red Hat joined the project, the second major corporate participant was CodeFresh. CodeFresh was a SaaS-based CI/CD development services company.
We had tools that looked a lot like Argo CD in CodeFresh, but we felt like we could innovate a lot more quickly if we joined in this open source world and started working with the teams. Intuit was looking for partners who could help take the load on that project, and we were obviously super excited to be part of that. And then we launched the first commercial version of Argo in 2020. And the reaction from our users when we made it available on the platform was electric. They were happy and now they were ecstatic.
We've been doing continuous delivery now, like as an industry, for a good 20 years or so, whereas GitOps is much newer and definitely has something to add, and definitely for an operations team is a complete game changer. But how you bridge those two worlds is actually like still a bit clunky, and it shouldn't be clunky. So we're very determined to work together to solve that and to solve it in a really nice, neat, usable way, but to really contribute back to Argo as well, and to make sure that we're being great contributors there.
I co-founded Akuity with Jesse and Alex. All three of us are the original creators of the Argo project. So when we started the company, we already have a very clear vision about what we want to do.
If you could see maybe a chart that represents growth of GitHub stars, you would see a big spike in 2021. It's just the time where Argo CD already had the critical mass of users, and amount of endorsement from those users, amount of content on internet, blogs, tutorials, adoption just exploded. That was a motivation for us. It was clear that obviously Argo CD is not going anywhere, and doing it as a separate company was way easier than a small team at Intuit.
We wanted to help people with their Argo adoption. We also knew the scalability challenges that they would eventually face.
We are helping so many customers adopting Argo now to do the GitOps, to do the application development, to manage their fleet of the clusters.
So the year's 2021, Argo is gangbusters. Everybody's super excited about it. The maintainers, we got together and we said, hey, we should really throw an ArgoCon.
The first conference actually was a virtual conference because I think it happened during the COVID period.
We had like 4,000 people participate and awesome speakers from all these different companies, that end users that were adopting Argo. So it was a huge success.
The second Argo conference was in person in Mountain View at the Computer History Museum.
I'm excited about seeing this. This is, the growth of not just the community, but people that actually contribute and lead this project. I was just blown away by the number of people that actually showed up.
Ever since then, we've been co-hosting them with the CNCF, and that has dramatically increased attendance as well.
We went there and we had a booth and we were talking to people and stuff. Raziel, the CodeFresh CEO, and I, we bumped into each other, and so we get chatting and we start talking about the future, and it just becomes quite clear. I just want to work with these people. They have the same vision for the future. They care about the same problems. The kind of company culture they're building, the way they want to kind of engage with the open source community and be good stewards of that, all really aligned with us, and so kind of decided to make that happen, and then financially figured out how to justify it, if that makes sense.
ArgoCon is amazing, I think, especially for the maintainers. Why? Every time I go to the ArgoCon, I hear thousands of times people talking to me, I love Argo.
People were just excited to meet somebody from Argo. They're like, I love your tool. I've been using this. It's made my life so much better. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to meet you.
It's just like you are depleted the battery and you get it recharged immediately in that 2-3 days. So that keep you going. You feel, hey, this is really something big and it's really meaningful to others. And you really make a dent in the open source history.
2 years after incubation, we successfully graduated the project at the CNCF.
That was the moment where I thought that, wow, this is going to be something really big. Because then you're among the big names with Kubernetes, with Linkerd, with Istio.
There's kind of nowhere else to go. Once you're graduated, it's kind of like you've reached the top.
The criteria for graduation, things like security, compliance, governance, it's a long road, right? And to meet all of these criteria requires a lot of effort across the community. It's an anomaly today, by the way, in the CNCF ecosystem, that you have a project like this, which has 4 different sub-projects, and they're equally successful in their own right.
I want to say it's emotional, but I can get that feeling is, okay, finally, we worked so hard. And we spent 6-7 years on this project. I'm talking about at the very beginning, when it's not even being called Argo yet. towards it can be graduated. So we are so proud. Yeah, I can talk with my grandchildren in the future, talking about, hey, you know what? I actually got one project I created, and it's so well received, and so well recognized by the community. Everyone love it.
We had not done any major open source project. We were like open source newbies, basically. And it took quite a number of years, but at this point, Argo is a very successful project.
We have over 12,000 contributors today. We have about 2,000 companies that these contributors come from. That scale is amazing. It is just humbling to see from where we started.
Whether it's TikTok or whether it's Tesla, most popular tech companies today are Argo users.
And I don't see how it could have possibly gotten there without help from our partners, the CNCF, as well as all of the community members out there. They're kind of like the silent majority, but they're the ones who really drive the success of any open source project.
I think that gives Argo a very bright future as far as having lots of talented contributors at lots of companies vested in making it successful.
The mission of Argo started off as help people do stuff with Kubernetes more easily. And it turns out that this amount of stuff that people want to do with Kubernetes, that list just keeps on getting longer. So from a feature perspective and like a roadmap perspective, we have a totally full feature roadmap for the next 3 years of stuff that we can add into the project and get out there into the community.
I think the next level of adoption is actually orchestration and pipelining of multiple Argo CD applications and promoting across your different environments.
Some of the things that we have been particularly interested in Intuit is extending like the Argo ecosystem with more kind of observability and analytics features. Also, we are looking at how to integrate generative AI with the Argo ecosystem.
So our brightest days, even though like we've just grown a ton and there's like this mass adoption of Argo happening, those brightest days I think are definitely very much ahead of us. You're gonna have to do a new documentary in like 5 years to like tell the news story of like, oh wow, now look where it is.